Let's check in with the doc and look at things with a wider lens. Pastor Richards on OMG.
Good morning, Pastor.
Hey, good morning, Daniel. Pleasant good morning to you. And
morning, Doc.
Hey, good morning, Mario.
Hey.
What a rare privilege it is. No meetings until 11, huh? Before I jump into my commentary, Mario, what are you doing in the dark underbelly of the Vincent Society?
You know, I was wondering if anybody would hold me accountable for being there.
Well, you know, I would. I was like, Mario. Everybody is questioning
why Jerry's name is being
mentioned,
cast.
but nobody is asking what is Mario doing
I'm
in
sorry,
the dark underbelly.
but you know what? If you know Mario, it wouldn't surprise you. So that's why I didn't can't hold him accountable. That didn't surprise me.
Doc, you would be the only one to do this to me.
Well, you know me already. I'm concerned about you, Mario. Listen, by the way, I want to appreciate, Daniel, I got a lot of feedback yesterday. Again, some programs I do and, hardly any feedback. And some programs seem to touch a nerve, and all through the day, even up to last night, I got a call from the U.S. About, stuff I said. A good gentleman friend yesterday mentioned Cartersville. And one of my friends from Cartersville, who is contending that I only have 3 friends in Cartersville. But he's Caucasian, but he really appreciates the fact that I at least try to have these difficult conversations. And he voice noted me, I think, or texted me to let me know that he appreciates. I got some feedback here in St. Vincent. For those who missed that yesterday, I was talking about the fact that we were saying that we don't have racism here in St. Vincent, but I told the gentleman that called last night, the label is what is getting in the way of the substance. Follow me. The label is getting in the way of the substance. You say racism or you say racist, and the hands are up anathema. Don't call me that, right? So you take away the label and just look at the what really is racism, and then you could decide whether or not. And I basically, for those who missed yesterday, I dug into the fact that where racism begins is with a stereotype based on skin color. And you begin to cognitively think through certain things related to the person with the skin color. And then that provokes certain feelings. I think yesterday I said that the lady who called, she was walking her dog in the park, and I think it was untethered, and therefore a black gentleman was telling her about it, and she called the cops. She called 911 on the gentleman because he's black. Sometimes you see a black man, if he's wearing a hoodie, if he's walking the street in a neighborhood where he should not walk, it provokes certain feeling, a very, very real fear. And there are people who really visibly get afraid when they see black because it is based on their stereotyping of what comes with a black man in a hoodie. And then, so I dealt with that yesterday, and then I said, but those two are the ones that are latent and covered up. But I said that the discriminative part of it is where you take action and discriminate. You treat one group different from another. So that's why I went yesterday, basically, and I said, no, notice what I was trying to say yesterday. So even if you don't want to take the name, carry the name racist, and you don't like the term racism, and I said yesterday that labels get in the way of the content of the thing. So strip away the term racist and strip away the term racism. Do we have stereotypes? Yes, we do. We stereotype people from, I mentioned over the Dry River. We think a certain way of them. We stereotype people based on party identity, the politics of identity politics. So we went into all of that, and the how we feel about people who are different from us, because part of human being condition is this whole thing that we must form identity, whether family or clan or tribe or party or race or nationality or flag. We identify and coalesce around something, and we defend what we identify around. And so others who are different from us, the exogenous group, those are developers where we have a different feel towards them and we act differently towards them. So whether you use the term racism or you don't use the term racism, the human condition is that we are prone to stereotyping. We are prone to, those of us who are honest, by the way, would admit it, that we are prone to stereotyping. We are prone to prejudice, and we are prone to discrimination. It is embedded in our social DNA. We do it all the time. And so this helps us to have an understanding of racism from a different angle. The gentleman who called from Georgia last night is writing a book, and he wanted my input in the book that he's writing. And he's written several books, a very, very deep thinker. And something that he said really caught my attention last night is this whole, he said people, and he agreed with me that people don't know when they're racist. They don't. Few of them are intentionally racist, but by and large, people don't realize that they're racist because this is so natural. And his thesis, and he's going to, I won't say too much of what's going to be in his book, but his thesis is that racism is a socially conditioned phenomenon, singular. It is socially conditioned, your laws, your societal mores and norms, familial conditioning, education, even media programming contributes to this imperceptible shaping of your mind over a period of time, so that you are conditioned, you are soaked by osmosis in a society that is unaware of its racist tendencies. You become a racist without even knowing it. And so that's going to be the thesis of his book, the conditioning, the imperceptible conditioning that causes one to become quote-unquote racist. We use a term in such a way that people back off from it, but people are racist without knowing it. It is something that happens. And so I think that his balm, his salve, his catharsis for that society is going to be re-examining the reconditioning of society. So you can't just have marches and Black Lives Matter and all of that. If you really do not change the societal structure that condition what we call racism, then we can have these peripheral marches and stuff. But if none of the real structures change, whether by mandate or by will, in terms of schooling, how you do schooling, how you the material that you use in school, your programming, television, all of the different tools of engineering socially, if these are not addressed with, and it takes thinkers to generate change, by the way, going back to Locke and Comte and other great philosophers, you know that it is the people who think deep who are the progenitors of change and provoke change. So while there's a lot of emotion and all of this related to the George Floyd and the other marches and protests, somebody's going to have to think this through and figure out. Yeah, I like this thesis, man. We have to get rid of this old system, and there are a number of aspects of that system that he outlined to me that condition people to be racist. And if we don't dismantle everything that conditions you to be racist and replace it with a new social system, so it's basically social reengineering. A gentleman that I don't always agree with, but I listen to from time to time because he's very cerebral. Now, you have to always agree with people. He's way too liberal for my taste, but Cornel West, he used to be at Princeton. He was a black professor at Princeton. You guys can look him up, but I think he's now at Harvard Divinity School, and he offers a lot of perspectives on the re-engineering of the American society, and his perspective actually finds congruence with mine in that it is not going to be true laws, although you can have laws, again, a revamping of civil laws. I have said that laws cannot change the soul. It can change the behavior, but it can't change the soul, and racism is something that comes out of the soul. And so I listened to Cornel at some point, maybe a couple of weeks ago, and he was basically touting the same narrative, that America needs a catharsis of soul, catharsis meaning a total wash, cleansing of soul. So I had very interesting conversations based on my commentary yesterday. One of the most interesting, actually, I was from right here in St. Vincent, where this lady messaged, mostly men messaged back for some reason after my program, but this lady messaged and said there's a lot of hypocrisy. So I was going through the message, and it came to a point where she made a point that made me stand up and think. She said the hypocrisy here in our part is all of the people who are condemning, joining with the hegemon, meaning the U.S. particularly, and condemning Venezuela. And her argument, think about it, she said, but how could these people be complaining? No, please don't stone me, just listen to the argument. How could our people here in St. Vincent be complaining about a white officer having his knee on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes to suffocate him, asphyxiate until he dies? How could that be such an outrage? Which it is, by the way, don't get me wrong. As I said, don't stone me, don't get me wrong. That is an outrage. But how could people, she asked, be outraged? And I thought it was brilliant parallel. How can people be outraged at this white guy of power? Because the issue is one of power. Both position power, the fact that he was a police officer, so he has that rank, that uniform, the power that comes with that authority, but also the power of his skin color, because that in itself carries an unspoken power. And how could he use that power to basically choke the life out of a black man who does not have, in the circumstances, the same level of power? And that is an atrocity, don't get me wrong, but her argument was people in St. Vincent are rightly outraged at that, but at the same time, the duplicity is that the power, the hegemon at the north, hegemony being the utilization of political and economic power. I mean, just look it up, hegemony, utilization of political and economic power to oppress and suppress other sovereign states. So how could that hegemon have its power on and have its foot, its knee, on Venezuela's neck for so long? And we are not talking 8 weeks and 8 days or 8 months, but for an extended period with the intent of choking the life out of Venezuela, what is deemed to be a lesser state. Isn't there something there that creates an outrage? How could you be, and this was her argument, brilliant, I thought brilliant, how could you be outraged at an officer choking the life out of a man, which you ought to be outraged at, and not be outraged at a hegemonic power choking the life out of Venezuela? In fact, some would actually not just fail to be outraged, but give support, vocal and otherwise, to this hegemonic power, and argue and articulate why what they're doing is right, what they're doing to Venezuela is right. I mean, and I stopped right there. I thought, this is so brilliant. How much of Venezuela's economy is privatized, by the way? You know, we talk about socialist state, but I mean, people, is there a private interest in and private interests in Venezuela's wealth? By the way, how much, before I make this an U.S. issue, how much did Britain, just do your research, I like to ask questions sometimes, Neil, how much did Britain confiscate from Venezuela? Same thing that I had another conversation with a gentleman from Haiti, and I was talking to him about the rape of Haiti, how France raped Haiti and left her in the dust for all these years. We applaud and we support these hegemonic powers that have had their knees on the neck of the powerless. How much did Britain confiscate from Venezuela? How much did the U.S. impound? Just because if I tell you, he's making it up. I can't trust that. Do your research. I mean, what have you stopped to think of without this confiscation of Venezuela's assets and the impounding by the U.S.? Have you stopped to think of how that could have been used in the development, the social development, and the social services within Venezuela? If they don't have it, they can't develop with it. If it is taken away, if it is impounded, if it is locked away, can't use what they don't have. Who's doing this? Who's choking them? I'm just asking these questions. When you seize, and is it true? I know it is true, but let me ask, is it true that an extensive amount of Venezuelan state assets have been seized? Just ask yourself that, yes or no. Ask yourself that. Who seized them? Why? The blockade, and which is a powerful tool used against Cuba, used against other countries, and now being used against Venezuela. I mean, at one hand, you're talking about the social mess of Venezuela, how it is horrible. In the same way that the powers in the U.S. talk about the black condition, talk about the slums and the ghettos, but they themselves create the condition. This is true. This is true. You create the social conditions that basically lead to the crime and the unemployment and all of the other things that you lament in black communities. The structures and strictures in place that give rise to these conditions. Now, I admit that suburban USA, for example, suburban USA, because I've lived there, suburban USA has a different look than some of these inner city places and some of these communities that I've also visited. Yes, of course. But what creates it? What causes it? Is it by the will of the black man that he's living in these conditions, or are there structures and strictures in place that provoke and lead to these things? And the same way in Venezuela, if you have confiscation of assets, if you have impounding of assets, if you have siege of property, if you have blockades and sanctions against it, which nation in the world could thrive under these? If you choke in a man, if your foot is on his neck, you will suffocate him. Of course he's going to suffocate and cry out for his mommy. Of course. He's suffocating him. So it's like we cry out at the suffocation of one man, but when an entire nation is suffocated and hundreds and thousands die because of that suffocation, there's no outcry. I mean, I can go on and on. I mean, but I think you all are getting the point. And the thing that incensed me, who watched the white guy with his hand in his pocket while his knee was on George Floyd's neck, the thing that incensed me was the fact that George Floyd was crying out for his life. He was suffering. And because he was crying and saying, I'm going to die, you're going to kill me, he cried for his mama, his dead mother. At some point, you realize, boy, now something is going on with this guy. I'm hurting him. The cop was aware, no, he won't call his name. The cop was aware that he was hurting Floyd. I think people who have the power are quite aware that they're hurting the powerless. So don't tell me that when the confiscations and impounding and sieges and sanctions and blockades are imposed on Venezuela, don't tell me that you don't see. Don't tell me that you don't know people are hurting. Of course you know. Because your foot is on their neck, you know what you are doing to them. By the way, historically, it's the same thing that was done to Cuba. Eh? I'm just saying. You know that your foot is on their neck. That's why I said yesterday is a difficult topic, because we really get worked up and we call out people like that white cop for being racist. And I told Daniel yesterday when I started my program, I said, generally before I really comment too heavily on this, I have to examine myself to see where I have these kinds of behaviors, where I unintentionally have these kind of attitudes and behaviors, that before I call out another man for putting his foot on somebody's neck, I have to be sure that I don't have my foot on somebody's neck, or I am not supporting those who have their knees on people's neck. Even here in St. Vincent, power is a nasty thing. I'm not talking political power. You have heard me nuance power, education power. You have heard me talk about position power. Even in relationships, I've talked about certain different types of ascribed power, the power of social scripting. These things I've talked about. And one thing I know as I watch the use of power, again, I'm not talking political power because, I get too much, flood of stuff if I make it political, so I won't. When I watch power is that the people with the power are continually putting their knees on the necks of the people without power. And you know what I mean. Even in relationships, you know what I mean. In multiple areas, you know what I mean. Yesterday I made reference to the African students, medical students, brilliant people who are here in St. Vincent, and how those who have the power of housing, the power of means and resources, and how there's a whole lot of exclusion that is taking place with respect to our brothers and sisters here, because they're out of their zone and they're in our land, and how we treat our brothers and sisters because of the power. There are many ways, I won't go into it, but there are many, many ways in which we have our knees on the neck of people. So before, I'm not saying having your knee on the neck of someone is right. I'm not saying what happened with the racism in America with George Floyd is right. But again, I make an appeal. Examine our own context and see if there aren't other things that we need to be calling out, where we see that the knee is on the neck of the powerless and the struggling. I'll close with this. This whole idea that God, in His holy word and in His promise of the coming of Christ, talks about this one who would make all the valleys filled and all the mountains brought low. Think about that. Think about that. There is a God and a God of justice, and in His justice, those hegemonic mountains, powerful mountains, will be brought low, and those that have been impoverished, the valleys, will be filled by the mercies of God. Have a good Wednesday, everyone.
Thank you so much, Pastor.
Thanks, Doc.
Hey, take it
All right,
easy.
have a good day.
Let's check in with the doc and look at things with a wider lens. Pastor Richards on OMG.